and his departure is not related to the Tory party's current challenges. However, we'll bring you more on that story as we get it. And in more breaking news, a fire has broken out at the Albion Hotel in Brighton. Footage of the blaze has been shared online, with witnesses saying the flames are spreading quickly across the roof and the top floor of the building, with winds spurring those flames. Emergency services are on the scene and they've been moving people a safe distance away from the incident. Again, this is a developing story and we will bring you more on this as we get it. Well, parts of the UK have been experiencing strong winds and thunderstorms, with yellow Met Office warnings in place across the south of England and Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland too. The Goodwood Festival of Speed had to cancel today's event for the first time in its 30-year history, and London's Kaleidoscope Festival at Alexandra Palace has been called off too. Weather journalist Nathan Rao told us high winds can be dangerous at this time of year.
Across the south of England, that's London and the south east, the east of England, Leicester, Leicestershire, Essex, all that sort of area. That's for gusts of up to 55 miles per hour, which doesn't seem that high, but remember that the trees are in full leaf at the moment, so strong gusts can cause more damage than they would do, say, for example, in November when all the leaves are down.
Well, in other news, councils in England and Wales have joined doctors in calling for a ban on disposable vapes. The local government association wants a UK-wide ban to be imposed next year over damage caused to the environment and the danger to young people. It says the 1.3 million vapes discarded every week are a litter blight and a fire hazard. Earlier this month, the British Medical Association voted to review the potential dangers of vaping, describing it as a growing epidemic. Well, meanwhile, junior doctors are striking for a third day in England. The BMA has warned the government their members will not back down over demands for a 35% pay rise. That's despite the Prime Minister adopting recommendations of the independent pay review bodies, making a final pay offer of 6%. The 5-day strike, the longest in NHS history, runs until Tuesday morning. International news, and one of the last two ships exporting grain from Ukraine under an agreement with Russia has now arrived in Istanbul. The Black Sea grain deal, which expires on Monday, has enabled Ukraine to export grain and food safely over the past year, despite the war. Ukraine is a major supplier of key crops like sunflower oil and barley. Moscow is threatening to pull out of the agreement and is calling for Western sanctions to ease. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he feels really well after being hospitalized due to dehydration. In a video recorded at the hospital, Mr. Netanyahu said he had been bathing in the Sea of Galilee during a heat wave. Netanyahu's office said he later complained of feeling light dizziness. Protesters have assembled outside the hospital and have been continuing to demonstrate against the Prime Minister's judicial overhaul. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Father Calvin.
Long before we were colleagues here at GB News, Darren Grimes and I headed up the Defund the BBC campaign. Gone are the days when they produced timeless, informative content like Kenneth Clarke's Civilization and John Betjeman's A Passion for Churches. These days, it seems they want to spend the entire time lecturing us plebs on how to live our lives, as they sneer down their noses at us from their metropolitan elite bubble. Even the so-called entertainment shows and drama shows are full of social justice warrior nonsense. There's nothing more distracting than trying to watch a television programme and noticing a pause in the script where the writers choose to lecture us on BLM, the climate agenda, COVID vaccines, or trans issues. The blatant bias is infuriating. And then there's the bloat. It's a huge waste of licence fee payers' money splashing out millions of pounds on woke celebrities and the bloated salaries of BBC fat cats. It's a shame because the BBC used to mean something. It used to be a soft power of the British Empire. It was respected for journalistic standards all around the world. But now it's nothing more than a monopoly, strangling independent radio and podcasters. The licence fee is outdated as a business model. If the BBC believes its content lives up to the standards of 2023, they should open it up to the free market. allow people to opt in, to subscribe to the BBC if they wish to watch BBC content. They should stop forcing people to pay for the BBC, even if they never want to watch it. As it stands, to watch GB News, you have to pay a licence fee to the BBC. Why? That's not a licence, that's a tax. How many scandals does the BBC have to face before politicians ask the question about defunding the BBC and finally cutting that TV tax? The latest scandal involving a certain newsreader seems to have been covered up by the BBC execs for 7 weeks, which comes as no surprise given the BBC's history of covering up scandals, from Jimmy Savile to Martin Bashir. But what is interesting in the reactions to the Beeb's latest transgression is that the metropolitan liberal elite are trying to paint the Hugh Edwards scenario off as homophobic, as if to imply the reason people are unhappy with his actions depends entirely upon the sex of the young persons he was chasing after. What a patronising view of the British public. Surely we were disappointed in Hugh because he has a wife and kids, and he's let down his family, and he's dropped the standards expected of any man, not to mention a figure in the public eye. Societal standards are important. His sexuality is neither here nor there, and frankly, it's being used as an excuse, just as it was with Philip Schofield. No one really cares if you're gay or straight in 2023. What people care about is if you're in your 60s and you're grooming teenagers whilst cheating on your wife and neglecting your children. That said, the pile-on has been horrible to witness, and I do not want to add to it. I put a lot of this blame on the BBC for being a corrupt organisation which encourages such behaviour. When it comes to Mr. Edwards himself, I would say it's time to give his family some privacy to heal and give him an opportunity to repent. Many commentators have been pretending his actions were okay because no laws were broken. We do not hold morality to the low expectations of the law of man, but to the law of God. Adultery is immoral, and his actions were wrong. That has to be said. But now we give him a chance to repent of his sins and seek forgiveness. We are not his judge. He will face his judge one day, as we all will. But there is still time to put things right. In the meantime, I spare a prayer for the let-down wife and children in the hopes that the family can find a way to mend as one. And let's call for the BBC to take an introspective moment to address why they keep bouncing from one scandal to the next, with next to no accountability. What is going on over there? The BBC is no ordinary media outlet, and its presenter is no ordinary journalist. But the network's wall-to-wall coverage has raised questions of its own. After the confirmation that Hugh Edwards, a prominent BBC anchor, was the unnamed person at the heart of allegations of sexual misconduct, ended days of breathless speculation that consumed British public broadcaster. It left a lingering sense of unease and doubt in BBC's credibility as a whole. It's time the BBC remembered they have a duty to be fair to the audiences and licence fee payers. Can the station get back to what it once stood for? All of which brings me to tonight's duel. So is it time to defund the BBC? Joining me now are my duelists, Emma Webb, UK Director of the Common Sense Society, and Sharar Ali, former Green Party Deputy Leader. Sharar, first off, let me ask you, what is your take on this BBC situation?
Well, I think, firstly, we are going to scrutinise the BBC as a publicly funded organisation, and I think that's only right. I do think there is a place for that kind of a broadcaster, but if the BBC carries on either wasting money, squandering money, or acting unethically, or employees acting questionably, then I think their days are increasingly numbered. And certainly the model as it currently stands is past its sell-by date. I think there are two issues really here with respect to that particular story. There's the professional ethics of the man at the centre of the storm, and then there's the media ethics. I mean, the absurdity, actually, of wall-to-wall blanket priority coverage on the news bulletins on a daily basis, which were irresponsible in their own right because it was fueling speculation about the identity of the individual, but also, in terms of media ethics, to put that ahead of war or floods or climate emergency, I would say that that was itself irresponsible and well beyond the justification which you could put on it, important though it might have been in terms of infractions or misbehaviour, it was well beyond where it should have been placed within the news agenda for the BBC for days on end.
Yeah, and Emma, there was almost a element of satire to this, wasn't there? Seeing the BBC report on the BBC, and I remember there's one shot where they zoomed out on their BBC centre while someone in the BBC centre is talking about the BBC. It's just all so meta.
Yeah, and I think there were a lot of people who were annoyed. They were annoyed with the BBC for throwing their own presenter under the bus, but they were also annoyed with the BBC for not doing enough about their own presenter. So it was a lose-lose situation for the BBC. Look, you know, I think we actually crossed paths for the first time, Calvin, when you were working for Defund the BBC. So as a small C Conservative, I love our great British institutions, and I want our institutions to flourish. But the fact is that the BBC is not the institution that it once was, not in any sense. And if you watch any footage, which on the rare occasion I do actually tune into the BBC, usually in a hotel room or something where there's no other option, and you see just how fundamentally biased in its bones the BBC has become, that it presents this very, very narrow vision of British society that excludes the vast majority of people. And I think that the British public, through all the scandals that you just mentioned, through its own programming choices, through its behaviour, through its ethics, for all of these different reasons, I think the British public have lost trust in the BBC. And it seems like total nonsense that people should be paying what is essentially a tax, wanting to watch other channels. Possibly they don't even watch the BBC because their figures seem to be dwindling more and more. Why should the British public have to pay the BBC? I think fundamentally, in order for it to survive, or even for it to get its act together, you know, it's going to need to reform to some other kind of model than the one that we're currently using, because it's just outdated.
Yeah, and I do remember that, actually.
And it's sad.
I was giving a talk on Defund the BBC to the New Culture Forum.
Yes, you were.
Somehow, for some reason, you were there because you're part of the Tufton Street elite. And you were like, sound!
The conspiracy.
I was like, who is that? And why should you say that? But yes, it is. Shara, what other method could we put in place? Could we replace this with an opt-in subscription service similar to Netflix and say, look, if you want to put out such woke content, if you want to lecture us all day, every day, if you want to tell us how to live our lives, then put your money where your mouth is and let people choose to subscribe to you?
I think, you know, there is a cultural malaise within the BBC insofar as they employ people who are like them and they project their own values. I think there is a risk and a danger in any organisation that they become very comfortable. Yeah. I would like to see a greater diversity of individuals presenting, and we need to get out of this mental straitjacket almost, this assumption, poor assumption, that we need to pay more to get the best or to retain the best.
Yeah.
You know, this is such a poor assumption. You could turn it on his head and say, in order to get the best, you need to pay less, because you'll get people who are competent, skilled, happy to give way to other people. We have so much hegemony in the BBC that we talk about news presenters as stars. I mean, this is just ludicrous. They shouldn't be part of the news. They shouldn't be seen as celebrities, nor should they themselves want to see themselves that way if they care about their role. It's absurd, it's preposterous, it's obscene to be paying 400k plus for these roles. That's not right, it's not fair. It then does introduce this ingredient that we want to know how they're spending or misspending their salaries. I think that's justifiable concern, and that's when it becomes the public interest. So let's pay less, not more. Let's have more rotation of good, skilled, competent people, and less of this celebrity within the BBC, much less of that.
Well, let's turn this inwards. Do you think we have hegemony, or do you think we're quite diverse here at GB News?
I see you as diverse. I see the skill and the professionalism within your organisation. I think it's there for anybody to see. And I think because you're dealing with the bare bones of a market, a greater market principle, I think that's a harder climate. And so I think there needs to be fairness within broadcasting. It's a fast-moving environment, and at the moment the BBC is hard pushed to justify itself.
Good, good. I wanted to ask you that because obviously we have different political opinions and people often say, you guys all think the same, but of course we don't. And that's the point of this, diversity of thought and opinion. However, Emma, where the BBC falls apart is the criminalisation of the licence fee. And we know that they go predominantly after women. The vast majority of their convictions are women. Do you think this is discriminatory? As a woman.
Well, no, not intentionally on their part, of course. But, you know, maybe, you know, when it comes to these people investigating you and the constant harassment harassment that you get coming through the door if you don't have a TV licence, which I experienced myself when I used to have a flat on my own. And I used to get these harassing letters all the time. And of course, I don't watch the BBC. I didn't have a terrestrial television or anything like that. Didn't need to pay the licence fee. And I think that possibly, maybe women are more likely to feel harassed by that. Maybe they're more likely to open the door and let these people come into their homes. Yeah. I think the criminalisation of the licence fee is absolutely insane. I think most people would think so. And I just frankly don't think that people should be forced to pay for something when they're not using the services that are provided. And just to very briefly go back to what you were saying, the BBC the idea of it was that it was supposed to be a service, and I think it's forgotten that.
And I don't know if you guys can remember, but they used to broadcast pictures of vans sitting outside houses and all these. It was a psyop. They never actually knew if you were watching BBC or not. It was all a lie. Plenty more to come this evening on my Common Sense Crusade. Next, we'll be joined by Father Felix Smith to discuss why the Church of England is considering defrocking archbishops, bishops and priests found guilty of abuse or serious misconduct. Plus, the Catholic Union has launched a new campaign to lift the 50% cap on faith-based admissions to new free schools, and it will only apply to oversubscribed faith-free schools in England. James Somerville-Makill will be here to tell us more.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, on your TV, online and on your wireless. The Church of England is considering defrocking archbishops, bishops and priests found guilty of abuse or serious misconduct, or so they say. The Church has not had the power to act upon an abusive priest from holy orders, known as defrocking, for 20 years. It was repealed in 2003 as part of a new law governing the disciplining of priests. However, measures proposed in papers submitted to the General Synod, the Church's legislative body, voted to reinstate these powers. This could be the Church's most serious penalty against its own clergy. Father Felix Smith joins me now to tell us more. Father Felix.
Hello there.
Thank you for joining us. What are your initial impressions on the motivation behind this?
So yes, on Monday, basically, General Synod voted a new measure, which was about clergy conduct. And the headline, of course, is that clergy can be defrocked. Literally, that means your clothes are removed. But before we start to get a bit worried about this, essentially Roman Catholics have this already. It's already a part of church discipline. It's called laicization, or deposition of holy orders. Essentially, you're turned from a priest or bishop or deacon back into a layperson again. You become a non-religious. So you can't function as a bishop, a priest, or a deacon again. Now, of course, this happens more often in the Roman Catholic Church at actually the priest's own request. So you might fall in love with someone and you'll ask your bishop, you want to get married, and you'll ask your bishop if you could be laicized, essentially. But it's also used, of course, as a punishment. So Pope Francis has used it as part of the clergy sex abuse scandals. They're sort of saying it's beyond just you're not allowed to have a parish, you're not allowed to function as a priest at all. So you can't function in that role in any way at all. Now, I expect it's done with a letter from the bishop, I regret to inform you that, so on and so on. But actually in the medieval era, it used to have a whole service. So your hands would be scraped with a knife where you were anointed with the holy oil. And you were literally defrocked. Your vestments were removed. Your head was shaved. I don't think the church will be going back to doing that again. No. But still, they will be bringing in this measure probably next year, so that for those who have been involved in serious misconduct, probably something that would involve a prison sentence as well and involve serious safeguarding issues. It's not going to be for something, upsetting the flower ladies or whatever.
Well, you say that, Father, but this is what I'm concerned about, because, of course, anyone that is abusive should be disciplined. And of course, I believe in defrocking priests who are abusive and or heretical or blasphemous, actually. I do think defrocking is a good thing in those situations. But we know that this won't be where it will stop, don't we? We see in the Roman Catholic Church, for example, Father Frank Pavoni, a very vocal pro-life priest, has been defrocked for being very pro-life and very vocal about it. And this is, I believe, what we'll see in the Church of England, that traditionalists that have been bullied for years through the clergy disciplinary measure will actually be defrocked, and it will be a way of ridding the church, or purging the church, essentially, of the trads and letting the woke liberals take over, will it not?
Well, I think it's interesting when you look at the measure, there's a lot of things in it that are actually there to protect clergy as well. It might seem like a way of kind of bashing, already demoralised clergy. But actually, a lot of the other parts that aren't getting the headlines are more to do with protecting clergy. At the moment, we are in a situation where if people make complaints that are malicious, you fall out with the organist and they decide to make a malicious complaint, then often a member of clergy is suspended straight away, and then, that could go on for months and months and months. So it seems like it's kind of doing a bit of both, in that it is making things stricter for those who are involved in serious misconduct, but there's also parts of it which are about protecting clergy as well. So I would hope that we wouldn't go down a road where it's kind of used in the wrong way, and actually almost it's trying to get away from that, so that it's not down to bishops always to decide what the best course of action is. So if you happen to fall out with your bishop, hopefully, it won't be up to them to decide finally in the end.
OK, thank you for that. That was Father Felix Smith. I just want to briefly bring my panel into this, because Emma, Father Felix sounds like a nice chap, but he's playing it safe because he's obviously employed by the Church of England. But do you think this will be used to push out and bully sound Orthodox priests who don't go down the trans agenda, don't go down the Black Lives Matter agenda, don't go down the climate agenda?
Do you trust the Bishop of London? Do you trust the Bishop of York?
I'm asking you the question.
Just look at what happened this week with York Minster, reported by GB News' very own Keith Bayes. York Minster not allowing pro-life campaigners to come and pray in the church. I think we've seen the church become so politicised that I agree with you. I think that defrocking is a very good idea in cases where, you know, there may have been sexual misconduct or in cases that are very clear-cut and serious, like a criminal offence has taken place. But I don't believe for a second that the Church of England, that has become so politicised, wouldn't gradually take a road towards this being abused to ensure that people such as yourself, Calvin, conservative Christians, wouldn't face some kind of penalties, as you described with that the Catholic priest.
Right, or as we used to call them, not conservative Christians, but just
Christians.
Right. Are you suspicious of this at all? Do you think this could be weaponised and politicised?
Every organisation needs to have a robust, transparent disciplinary system. I think what's interesting about this, with the serious, severe cases of sex abuse that have been mentioned, I think there was a reference also as part of this to the independent inquiry into child sex abuse. That inquiry, that public inquiry, looked at different domains and sectors, including Parliament. Green Party, as it happens, was hauled before that inquiry to talk about the Challoner case. So in every area, there is a great concern around people getting away with some of the most heinous crimes possible. So in that sense, I think it's very important that an organisation be less inward-looking, reserve some of the most serious forms of, it's almost like a form of excommunication, the way it's been explained to me, that people are properly,
thank you,
and the way Father Felix mentioned it, it used to be, importantly, public shaming, public acknowledgement for the most serious types of misdemeanour or misbehaviour. So in that sense, if you're going to reserve those for sex abuse, sex crimes, absolutely, but it has to go hand in glove with the criminal law. We're living in a democracy, after all, what passes for a liberal democracy. That needs to be hand in glove with this. Of course, any disciplinary process can be abused. I've been on the receiving end of one in politics. Many others who have perhaps supposedly not said the right thing, actually are getting vexation complaints against them. So that's all part of a robust system. I hope that will be taken care of.
Thank you. And just to clarify, it's not excommunication because you can still receive communion, but it is everything else. We have some breaking news. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace will quit the government at the next cabinet reshuffle. And we'll hear from Ray Addison on more of that.
Thank you, Calvin. Yes, in breaking news, Defence Secretary Ben Wallace will quit the government at the next cabinet reshuffle and not stand as an MP at the next general election. That's according to the Sunday Times. Now, it follows speculation that Mr Wallace would leave in the autumn after 4 years in the role. He's currently the local MP for Wyre and Preston North, which will disappear at the next election after boundary changes. It comes after the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, rejected comments from Mr Wallace suggesting that Ukraine should show, quote, gratitude for the military support that it has been given. So just to confirm, in breaking news, Defence Secretary Ben Wallace will quit the government at the next cabinet reshuffle and will not stand as an MP at the next general election. That's according to reports by the Sunday Times. This is a developing story. We'll bring you more on this as we get it. Back to Calvin.
Thank you, Ray. Sorry for trying to do your job there. Plenty more to come this evening on my Common Sense Crusade. Next, we'll be talking to James Somerville Makill, about the Catholic Union's decision to launch a new campaign to lift the 50% cap on faith-based admission schools. Plus, stick around to hear from the director of Don't Divide Us, Alka-Segel Cuthbert, who will share with us their new report they released on schools being taken over by organisations teaching anti-racism theories. Back in a tick.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. An unseasonably windy Saturday for many of us through today, all due to this low pressure system. We saw gusts close to 50 miles per hour, even in some inland areas of southern England, and those winds will be staying with us throughout this evening and overnight. We've also seen a good number of thunderstorms throughout the day as well. Those will continue to rumble on into the evening before eventually easing their way off a touch, but showery outbreaks of rain continuing across many locations overnight. The breeze that's in place will mean that our temperatures won't be dropping too far at all, most of us holding up around 12, 13 degrees Celsius. No, not a particularly chilly start to Sunday morning. The winds, though, will begin to ease their way down across southwestern areas of Wales into England, but it is still going to be quite breezy through Sunday for eastern coastal areas up into central Scotland. Some more persistent rain for western areas of Scotland, and again some thunderstorms possible in the east-northeast. In between some of the showers elsewhere across England and Wales, seeing highs around 20, 22 degrees Celsius. But still rather cool in that breeze that is around. The low pressure centre is going to push its way off towards Scandinavia as we move into the start of the new working week. So there will be still some outbursts of rain first thing on Monday for parts of Scotland, but they will gradually ease their way down, and most of us will then enter another day of sunshine and showers. The wind's noticeably lighter across southern areas of the UK, just the breeze still lingering on a touch more across the far northeast. Further showers as we head throughout the rest of the week as well.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, on your TV, online and on your wireless. The Catholic Union has launched a new campaign to lift the 50% cap on faith-based admissions to new free schools, and it will only apply to oversubscribed faith-free schools in England. Introduced by the coalition government in 2010, the cap made it difficult for new Catholic free schools to open, as the policy was incompatible with church law. The union has opposed the cap since it was introduced, but in 2017, the Conservative manifesto committed to lifting the cap, but this was never achieved until now. So joining me now in the studio, I have the Deputy Director of the Catholic Union of Great Britain, James Somerville-Makel, to tell me more. Now, James, first of all, what was the contradiction or the conflict with church law and the law of the land?
So in this case, it was the fact that when Catholic schools open, they are first and foremost for the Catholic community. They're there as mission schools to pass on the faith and the values of the church. And of course, we welcome people from other backgrounds and none. So 40% of pupils at Catholic schools come from other faiths and none. But they are first and foremost for the Catholic community. And with this cap in place, it would mean schools turning away pupils purely because of their faith. And so our bishops couldn't sanction that. And it's meant the Catholic community now can't take part in this government flagship policy.
OK, so it would end up with schools saying, no, you're Catholic, so you can't come in because we've met our quota.
Exactly right. Yes. Yeah.
That's bizarre. OK, so it looks like this is going to get reversed, or the cap is going to get lifted. Is it going to go through?
Well, we have about a year to the next general election. It was promised in the 2017 manifesto. We didn't manage to get it lifted. There was no mention of it in the 2019 manifesto. The government have said they're keeping it under review. We've launched an open letter to the Secretary of State, Gillian Keegan. We've already got several hundred people backing that letter. We're hoping to get a lot more, so that she hears the strength of feeling from the Catholic community that this policy needs to be scrapped for the next election to show this government's left a legacy of delivering for faith groups.
Oh, so it's not a given that this is going to get lifted?
Not at the moment, no.
You're
Unfortunately
relying on
not.
the competence of our Education Secretary. I will withhold my comments on that one. But it's interesting that this was in the manifesto since 2017 and they've not acted upon it. That's disgraceful for the Conservative governments, especially since they are the ones that put it in the first place. But what would you say to people who say, but this is not inclusive, you know, what we need these schools to be taking on board people from different faiths and different backgrounds?
Well, I say they are inclusive. I mean, you look at our Catholic schools at the moment, half of pupils come from ethnic minority backgrounds. They go out of their way to recruit pupils from the most deprived backgrounds, so they're already doing great work in this area. There's a real point about principle here, which is that if you believe in plurality and diversity in our education system, you can't have a flagship government policy where an entire faith group cannot take part. And one of the most fundamental principles and values in education is sending your child to a school that reflects the values and faith at home. That's how we create a pluralist, tolerant, open society. If it doesn't start at the home and schools, you don't get diversity in society. So there's an important point of principle here. Practically, it's holding back new Catholic schools from opening. So both practically and from point of view of principle, it needs to go.
Well, yeah, I would agree. I think we need more Catholic schools because they are schools that still tend to at least stick to their values, which is something I can't say for Church of England schools. But the point there is the values. If a family is sending their child to a Catholic school, they suspect they know what the value set is going to be. Therefore, there's going to be more demand for that. And what we're seeing, I don't know if you can collaborate this, is that, or corroborate rather, words, what are they? Is that Muslim families are taking their children out of Church of England schools at the moment because they're realising that they're teaching woke nonsense about transgender issues and woke nonsense around sexual ethics that don't subscribe to the Christian value set. Are Catholic schools seeing the same problem?
I think that we are seeing an increasing appetite and interest in people sending their children to Catholic schools to make sure their children are brought up in an environment that reflects the values and faith of home. That's absolutely right, and I think all parents would want to do that. It's one of the most natural things in the world. The really frustrating thing with this cap is that it only applies when a school is oversubscribed.
Right.
So actually, with a lot of other faith group schools, the cap doesn't apply because they're not oversubscribed. It's precisely because Catholic schools are so popular, they achieve above average results, there's a great care and quality in their teaching, that parents from all backgrounds, all faiths and none, want to send their children there. So Catholic schools are in effect a victim of their own success.
Yeah. And they should have that mission. I'm with you. I want to read a quote from one of my favourite Catholic bishops, Bishop Barron, who said that some years ago, when I was an auxiliary bishop in California, I was in dialogue with the board members of a Catholic high school. When I commented that their purpose of the school was ultimately evangelization, many of them balked and said, if we evangelize, that will alienate most of our students and their parents. My response was, well, then you should just close the school. Who needs more secular STEM academies? Needless to say, I was never invited back to address the board. Is this not the fundamental problem with our faith schools in the UK, Emma Webb? That they're not willing to evangelise, they're not willing to be proudly Catholic. They want to be inclusive, whatever that means.
Well, I mean, if you send your child to a Catholic school, I think you should expect that it will be a Catholic school. In the same way that if you send your child to an Islamic faith school, you would expect that it would be an Islamic faith school. I also don't see a problem with admitting 100% Catholic students. I think it's an absurd situation that a Catholic school should have to turn Catholic students away just because they're Catholic. It's a very strange government policy, particularly given the fact that Catholic schools do, at least from what I've read, seem to perform better than the standard. And this is going to put more pressure on Catholic schools because they can't open new Catholic schools. I think the whole system seems to be absurd. I think you need to be very careful in terms of, and probably I'm a bit more liberal than you on this, Kelvin. I don't think schools should teach contested ideas as fact. And I think that faith schools need to be very careful to be respectful in their evangelisation.
Is Catholicism a contested ideology?
Well, in the sense that some people don't believe in it. I mean, if you
But
send
then you
your
don't send your child to a Catholic school.
No,
surely a
well,
Catholic school should be teaching an ideology of Catholicism.
But what I mean to say is that I don't think there is any problem with a Catholic school being explicitly Catholic in its values and in its beliefs. It's just that if they are going to, for example, receive public money from the government, that there need to be some kind of boundaries in place, because we're not just talking about Catholic schools here. And obviously, we have an interest in wanting the Christian gospel to be spread as far and wide as possible, but this would also apply to other faith schools as well. So you need to be very careful about these things so that you're being, respectful of those who might be in these schools who are not coming from a Catholic home. And yes, you're right, their parents don't need to send them there. But I think there is a balance to be struck whilst also recognising that there's no problem with a Catholic school being explicitly Catholic.
You're right, that was very liberal. Sharad, Washington.
Well, I mean, this is a potentially very long but a great topic for debate. Just, in a nutshell, in terms of Green Party policies, if that's of interest, we don't support or defend the free school agenda as such. We do think there's a problem there. And same with faith schools as such. We wouldn't want to abolish them, but there wouldn't be the same degree of public funding for them. But I think what's very interesting in this diversity of educational offering, if you like. It's James, is it?
Yes.
So you put forward the proposition, which I think is foremost in most parents' mind. I mean, I'm a parent. Where can I get the best education for my child? Almost irrespective of the religious ethos. But that almost brings us back to what's at the heart of the Greens' policy here, which is that we want the best education for everybody, however that's done. Now, you may say that you can't have one size fits all, and one way you might not be able to achieve that is when you look at, and Emma put the point very well actually, is that you do need standards and quality. And there may be a point, we don't have to choose Catholicism, we could talk about Islam. If you see certain values being promulgated, they might be homophobic. You do get flashpoints across society, you do get news stories coming out. If you have a religion of a faith school which is teaching in a way which we regard as backward, immoral, or contrary to liberal values, we need to have a way of intervening. So I'm going to have to,
but I strongly disagree, because who is we and who are we to intervene? If we know a faith school is a faith school, it should be adhering to that faith, especially Catholic schools. More of them, please. That was James Somerville-Meikle. Thank you for your time today. Let's see what is coming up in the rest of the show. Thank you to Emma Webb and Shira Ali for joining, and we will see them again next time. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. Please do send me your comments, emails, and tweet at GB News. Coming up in the final part of my Common Sense Crusade this week, we'll be talking to the director of Don't Divide Us, Alka Segal-Cuthbert, who will share with us their new report they released on schools being taken over by organisations teaching anti-racism theories. Back with you soon.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Calvin's Common Sense Crusade. A new report warns schools are now being taken over by organisations teaching controversial anti-racism ideologies. In some classrooms, students are taking part in tests to check their unconscious bias by taking online surveys to see if they understand the term white privilege and what they could do if a teacher mispronounces the name of a Middle Eastern student. This sounds to me like critical race theory. And joining us now, we have Dr. Alka Sehgal-Cuthbert, the director of Don't Divide Us. Alka, it's been far too long. Thank you for coming on. Can you run us down what is going on? How is unconscious bias still in the classroom?
Good evening, Calvin. Thank you for inviting me on. It hasn't gone away from the classroom. It morphed since 2020 through the percolation into schools through these unaccountable organisations, most of whom are companies. And I wouldn't say it's a takeover as much as a open invitation, as they're being invited into schools by heads, by EDI, that's Equity, Diversity and Inclusion teams, to address what seems to be a real loss of confidence on their part in the intrinsic value of education itself. Because if they were educating properly and they were confident about what they were doing, they would not need to pay lots of money to bring in so-called experts on racism, experts who have, as far as we can see, very few of them have any substantial qualifications in education in the scholarly sense of the word, or in child development, in the history of schooling, for example, epistemology, philosophy of education. None of that. What you do get is a lot of credentialised academics in leadership for learning, or, decoloniality. Several of them are linked to Leeds Beckett University's Centre for Education and Decoloniality. And they are being invited into schools in a way to address what people who perhaps are new to it or who haven't thought it through very deeply think that they're doing the right thing by being anti-racist. But what they don't realise is that when they think of anti-racism, they're thinking of something that is a very different kettle of fish to the new critical race theory inflected anti-racism, even if they don't call it that.
Racist, rather than this whole, you're either racist or anti-racist. I'm fortunate enough to visit a lot of schools, Alka, and quite often I find that these head teachers aren't trying to be woke, they're not trying to push an ideology, they just feel like they have to address this issue in some way, which is why I quite often push them in your direction and say, look, don't divide us. But can you recommend something? Can you tell these head teachers and parents how they can address the issue of race without subscribing to the divisive ideology of critical race theory?
I think the first thing I would advise any head teacher or senior leadership team who's feeling under pressure is to take a deep breath and think calmly and rationally and think, if you're going to bring in one of these organisations, what are you saying? What problem is implied in that intervention? And I would put it to them that the problem is that there is something so deeply and horribly racist about their school that they need to bring in these new experts. And they have to ask themselves, is that true? And in the majority of cases, it is not true. Every head I've spoken to, if I ask them, what is the problem of racism in your school? They say, oh, no, we haven't got one. But, we want to address the disparities. Well, schools are not there to address the disparities. Schools are there to teach the best knowledge that we have to all children in the best way possible. Simple as that. That is a really worthwhile, valuable, deeply ethical thing to do because it's connected with the idea of truth. It's connected with the idea of tolerance, in being able to listen to views you disagree with, in being able to infer and see the implications of a train of thinking in a way that's subjective, in a way that isn't attached deeply to your own personality. Because if you think ideas are the person, then you can never have a reasonable discussion. You'll be too scared of offending or being offended, really. And then if they decide there's no problem there, then I would think, seriously, what is the problem then? And if it's underachievement in their particular school, then why are those particular students underachieving and what do they need? It will lead them in a different direction than to the third-party organisations that we look at in our report.
I think we could do with fewer third-party resources and groups in our schools, and you're always very wise on this. Thank you. That was Dr. Alka Sehgal-Cuthbert. Please do look up Don't Divide Us for more information on this. Now, each week on the show, we like to end with our closing prayer, and this week we'll hear the Collect for the 6th Sunday after Trinity, read by Millie from LVS Ascot School.
O God, who has prepared for them that love thee such good things as pass man's understanding, pour into our hearts such love towards thee, that we, loving thee above all things, may obtain their promises which exceed all that we can desire. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
You've been watching Calvin's Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson. I'll be back next Saturday at 7 p.m. God bless.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. An unseasonably windy Saturday for many of us through today, all due to this low pressure system. We saw gusts close to 50 miles per hour, even in some inland areas of southern England, and those winds will be staying with us throughout this evening and overnight. We've also seen a good number of thunderstorms throughout the day as well. Those will continue to rumble on into the evening before eventually easing their way off a touch, but showery outbreaks of rain continuing across many locations overnight. The breeze that's in place will mean that our temperatures won't be dropping too far at all. Most of us holding up around 12, 13 degrees Celsius. No, not a particularly chilly start to Sunday morning. The winds, though, will begin to ease their way down across southwestern areas of Wales into England, but it is still going to be quite breezy through Sunday for eastern coastal areas up into central Scotland. Some more persistent rain for western areas of Scotland, and again some thunderstorms possible in the east-north-east. In between some of the showers elsewhere across England and Wales, seeing highs around 20, 22 degrees Celsius, but still rather cool in that breeze that is around. The low pressure centre is going to push its way off towards Scandinavia as we move into the start of the new working week. So there will be still some outbursts of rain first thing on Monday for parts of Scotland, but they will gradually ease their way down, and most of us will then enter another day of sunshine and showers. The wind's noticeably lighter across southern areas of the UK, just the breeze still lingering on a touch more across the far north-east. Further showers as we head throughout the rest of the week as well.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Congratulations to Nigel Farage, voted by you as the nation's best news presenter at the prestigious Trick Awards.
It's Saturday night and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes along with Albie Amancona, Emily Carver, Benjamin Butterworth and Patrick Christie's. Tonight on the show, it's time, folks,